The Four-Generation Cycle in the United States by Galyn Wiemers in his book Hope for America's Last Generation. Proverbs 30, verse 11. There is a generation that curseth their father, and doth not bless their mother. The first generation appears to have unfolded in America between the years 1880 to 1920. When we read documents from this time, we find the generation in a continual process of questioning and rejecting the validity of Christianity. Criticism of Christian ideas grew strong during these years, bolstered by arguments from science, education, industry, and philosophy. The arguments against Christianity even found a way into the church itself. People began thinking that the way their fathers always sought to honor God was strange. Communication with the divine was deemed silly and worshiping God unnecessary. Thanks to the teaching of some key figures during this time, an entire generation began to break away from the Christian worldview altogether. Proverbs 30, verse 12. There is a generation that are pure in their own eyes, and yet is not washed from their filthiness. The second generation, 1921 to 1960, felt a void left to them by the first generation as they drifted further into sin. Modern liberalism has lost all sense of the gulf that separates the creature from the Creator. According to the Bible, man is a sinner under the just condemnation of God. According to modern liberalism, there is really no such thing as a sin. At the very root of the modern liberal movement is the loss of the consciousness of sin. Of course, this second generation have been raised to question and doubt. They've been taught to consider traditional Christian doctrine as ancient myth and pre-scientific thinking. They believe the concept of a God who would judge all mankind was nothing more than an age-old ploy used to intimidate people into socially acceptable behavior. They decided that the concept of the sinfulness of man was merely a stumbling block to a human potential. The 1920s marked the beginning of a new movement toward user-friendly faith. The divorce rate in the United States increased fivefold from the beginning of the first generation to the middle of the second generation, 1870 to 1930. Well-known authors attacked religion and mocked the concept of revival. The mood of the country became restless and wild. During Prohibition, Chicago gang warfare left hundreds of people dead. Women known as flappers bobbed their hair and wore short skirts while they smoked, danced, and drank their way across town. More than 40,000 members of the Ku Klux Klan gathered to march down Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. Proverbs 30, verse 13. There is a generation, oh how lofty are their eyes, and their eyelids are lifted up. The third generation, 1961 to the year 2000, engaged in behavior that our society had never been witness to. As America continued to make scientific advances, introducing new technology and medicine, Christian truth and a sense of morality were traded en masse for a culture of self-expression. They are egotistical and condescending. Their personal arrogance and disregard for others is manifested in much of what they do. It's all about them. The third generation pursued their heightened sense of a personal life, encouraged in the manifesto, but this personal life came at a great cost. Those who paid the highest price were discarded, spouses and children. The landscape of our society became a landfill of broken marriages and broken homes. We still don't understand the total cumulative effect this will have on the fourth generation. Although we don't know exactly what the kids who grew up rummaging through this social landfill will be like when they're older, we do have some early indication. A study of more than 1 million children who were tracked for more than a decade found that children raised in broken homes were twice as likely to suffer from serious psychiatric disorders. They were twice as likely to attempt to commit suicide and twice as likely to develop an addiction to alcohol. Girls from broken homes were 3 times more likely to become drug addicts, and boys from broken homes were 4 times more likely to become addicted to drugs. Studies with the findings similar to this are countless. Because of this new relational environment, two-parent intact families could no longer be used as a measuring rod for a good home. So the third generation rushed to create a new measuring stick. First, they determined that a good parent would now be anyone who was overly involved in their children's lives. To make up for their inability to stay together, unhealthy moms and dads became emotionally intertwined with their children. A good home then became any home where the children were loaded down with performance-based extracurricular activities, music, clubs, sports, etc. These activities were essentially to the overall evaluation because the primary indicator of a good home was now any home where children were given the best and most educational opportunities. Education was again deemed the highest virtue. Proverbs 30, verse 14. There is a generation whose teeth are as swords, and their jaw teeth as knives, to devour the poor from off the earth, and the needy from among men. The fourth generation, 2001 to 2040, is described as a generation who will devour the poor and the needy from among mankind. In other words, anyone who is not productive has no value. Abortion is just the beginning of how this prophecy will play out. Euthanasia will soon become a reality as well. Their teeth are swords, and their jaws are set with knives. Teeth and jaws are used to chew and devour food, thus satisfying hunger. The fourth generation will have a deep hunger that will never be satisfied. They will have insatiable desires created by the decline of society and the rampant display of sin and unrestrained greed. They will be a heartless and violent generation, not caring about the poor, since those who are rich can more quickly attain fame and power. Money will become everything. The fourth generation is now entering adulthood. Most were raised in broken homes, taught in humanistic schools, and bombarded by the media at every turn. They were taught there is no creator, no such thing as sin, no judgment day, and no afterlife. They are maneuvering in a culture sick with hedonism and materialism. The fourth generation doesn't even wonder about the God of the Bible. To them, the idea of a living according to traditional Christian values is laughable. This generation doesn't believe in absolutes. They believe that each man should decide for himself what is good. They think having tolerance for all people and all behavior is the only acceptable way to live. The truth has been lost, and all the information that's been acquired in this age of technology can't bring it back.